Welcome to episode number 63 of the Speaking Podcast. All episodes can be found on speakingpodcast.com. We also have the meditationpodcast.org and learnpolishpodcast.com. My guest today is all the way from India, DanRam. Yes, is that the correct pronunciation?
Yes, DanRam it is.
And Dan, how I always do, I never do a speech where I'm reading much what people send. I prefer you telling me.
All right. So I am a professional MC. It's a slight niche away from the speaker, the professional speakers, but it entails a lot of the similar elements. My focus is not to sell an idea, a product or service like a professional speaker. My focus is to create memories and experiences for audiences. So same stages, same events, slightly different motivation. And that is what I do. I host about 100 tech conferences a year on 4 different continents, and currently doing the same except virtually, because at the time of recording this podcast, we're in the middle of a pandemic. But I'm still committed to elevating the knowledge of audiences, still committed to creating experiences for people who are watching and participating. And so the work continues.
Excellent. 100 a year. That's a lot. That's a lot of traveling.
That is a lot of traveling, but we calculate all the air miles and we try to offset the carbon footprint as much as possible. It helps to be single because then I can commit myself entirely to my work. But yes, it is a lot of events.
Brilliant. And like, you have been on stage with a lot of powerful people, so you might tell who you've been on stage with.
Well, I said this at the get-go, my commitment is to the audience. And so what I'm most interested in is the mindset and the desire of the audience. That's why I show up on stage, is to help elevate people to the next level, whether it's to launch their business, whether it's to learn some new innovation practice that is out there, whether it is to connect people to whoever can open a door. That said, part of the job is the huge blessing of interviewing and introducing and moderating panels with some really, really powerful people. Everyone from presidents, like presidents of the United States or Switzerland or Poland, prime minister in your case, in Poland, or whether it is, say, artists, Grammy-winning artists, whether it is famous celebrities from Hollywood, from YouTube, from the social media world, whether it is, let's go, what else? Athletes, we love them, athletes, whether it's football players. So I've worked, I can say, with some of the best, so like President Barack Obama or Sir Richard Branson, or the founders of some of the biggest companies in the world, from PayPal to Airbnb to Virgin Air to football captain. So that is part of the job, but it's always to facilitate and create a conversation for the audience. So it looks great for the photos to be with those people, but the purpose is really not to elevate them. They're as elevated as can be, but to really unlock opportunities and doors for the audience.
Yeah. And does that put more stress on you when you've got the likes of a president or, say, Richard Branson? That would be...
Does it put more stress? For sure it does, but probably not for the reasons that people think. At the end of the day, probably because I interact a lot with millionaires and billionaires and, state governments, national level, state level, county level, at all levels of decision makers, I realize they're fully human. And as much as their positions and their titles are impressive, they're humans with real human needs and desires, just like anyone else. And I know this because we hang out backstage. And so before the performance that comes on stage, or before the character that they play, right? Because everyone, when you have an audience, plays a certain character. Even when you go to a party, it's a version of you that shows up to a party. So whenever there's a stage, it's a version of you. So we all love that, we all adore that. But I have the huge benefit of meeting them backstage, meeting them over dinner, meeting them for a cup of coffee, where I meet the humanness of them. And so that actually does not scare me, because I realize the human that is Barack Obama. I meet, the human that is Kevin Olusola, famous 3-time Grammy Award winner. And it's a huge privilege. What adds pressure is everything else. because they have security teams around them. And those guys are a pain to deal with, honestly. You know, they restrict my movement, even though it is my stage of my event. My movement around is heavily restricted, what we can and what we can't do. The expectations, which are fair expectations, but you know, the hotel room that they have to be in has to be reinforced, and sometimes there are architectural restructuring that's required, and that is a nightmare to figure out. How do you replace windows and add bulletproof windows to a hotel that is 80 years old? You know, so some of those things are what add stress. Interacting with them, absolutely not, because I insist on meeting the human. And I think that's my magic on stage, is I am not a CNN reporter or a BBC reporter or someone that is a journalist. I am a mere human that is talking to another mere human. And we try to do what we can to help other humans so that we can all grow, we can all learn.
Lovely. Yeah, love it. And I seen in one of your videos, and I thought it was a beautiful message, is it wasn't the size of the audience, because you've obviously spoken in front of thousands of people, but you said given the same commitment when it's a small room. And I thought that was, you know, very important.
Absolutely. I think including myself, it's easy to get distracted by the numbers. We often measure impact by numbers. We often measure success by numbers. But numbers are simply statistics. It is not correlated to your happiness, to your fulfillment, to your realization of your purpose, to your fulfillment of your mission or your vision. That is ultimately what creates a sense of belonging and a sense of achievement. And so it is easy when you put out a video, if for myself included, to go, oh, this didn't get as many views as the last video. I must be doing something wrong. What I should be measuring is, for the person that watched it, are they in a better place than before they watched it? If so, success, fulfillment, you know, purpose achieved. So even with events, it is easy to get distracted and go, well, I've been doing events for 600 people, so now I want to move up to 2,000 people. Now I've done 2,000 people, so I need to move up to 5,000. I need to move up to 10,000. And that is a form of success in some ways. But if you're really measuring impact, if you're measuring being relevant, if you're measuring improving your art of speaking, of communicating, of engagement, numbers doesn't mean anything. I've seen people that are in front of 10,000 member audiences and bomb. And it has nothing to do with the quality of their speech or even what they're talking about. Sometimes what they're talking about is garbage, and they just pay their way to be on that stage. So I would never confuse statistics like that with success or fulfillment. I think you got to go far deeper. Yes.
No, beautiful. I like that. And something that I've seen recently, I've always kind of, you know, tracked numbers and everything. And one of the things that I done was on the social media was Twitter, because I felt I don't really get much response. And I think something like 7,500. So I unfollowed everybody else. And then the numbers dropped down, because there's a lot of formulas. So sometimes there's actually computer programs that are actually doing this. They're even making comments to people. And I'd have, I don't know, something like 4.5. I've never got engagements from it. So sometimes people think this is great, but the reality is, if I say, look at other Facebook groups or whatever, the people are engaged. So they're true fans. And that is so much more important. So it's exactly like the room, you know, talk to 10 people that are totally committed, listen, and you can change their life, as opposed to 10,000 that somebody's just talking for the sake of talking. So
Roy, I'll be super honest with you. There is a buzz and an adrenaline rush that comes from being on a massive stage with literally hundreds of lights that are pointed at you, with a band that really makes the ground shake as you walk up, and then you see a sea of faces, so many that you can't even distinguish eyebrows or smiles, because it's just a sea of faces. There is a rush from that, I'm not going to lie. But ultimately, the reason I wake up every morning, the reason I take care of myself and I'm switched on and I'm elevating my game every single day is not because there's an audience every single day that equals 10,000 people watching me. That's impossible. The reason is because of the one person that DMs me going, Dan, your story yesterday really inspired me to start achieving my dream. The one email that comes from me saying, Dan, I saw you at this event And it really inspired me to launch my business. Now I believe I can do it. The one conversation I have after an event, there might be 10,000 people watching me, but it's those one-on-one conversations of people going, Dan, there's fire in your eyes, and I want that fire. I want to be truly alive. I don't want to waste my life. That is what wakes me up, because that's what makes you study, learn, research, because then every single person, every single touch point becomes important. I'm not waiting for another 10,000 people to show up at the next event. I'm still showing up every single day, because those 1 people are expecting greatness every single day, and I'm committed to that.
Beautiful. Yeah, love that. And what's your journey? Like, how were you when you were younger? You're excellent on stage. I've seen some of your videos. So, but in school, or how did you get into speaking?
Yeah, so exact opposite of who you know today. And in fact, a lot of people that know me from my childhood are as shocked as I am that this is my career. Because in almost everywhere I was the opposite. I preferred animals to humans. I would say a primary reason my parents bought me pets is because I would have longer conversations with my pets than I would even with them. I was always the shy, nerdy, introverted, geeky child in school. I was not as flamboyant in my outfits as I am now on stage. I was not as outspoken in my opinions as I am now on stage. I wasn't as confident or charismatic as I am now on stage. I was essentially the opposite of all of those things. But every part of our journey, every chapter of our journey is essential, because my introverted nature is what makes me ask good questions rather than jumping to give the answer. My introverted nature is what helps me create my own energy rather than needing energy from an audience like an extrovert would. My nerdy, geeky nature is what makes me study, what makes me research, what makes me Google things and explore ideas. I would say being the outsider of my class for most of my childhood is what makes me pay attention to the single individuals in a large audience that maybe are not connecting, that maybe are not understanding, and reaching out to make sure that every event that I do is fully inclusive and fully useful to every person that is there. So I say that my past was the opposite, but in many ways it has fed into who I am today. It's not a different version of me. It's not the opposite version. It is a part that continues to live out, just in a very different way. But yes, I was the opposite human of who you know today from the ages of, say, 0 to 15.
Very good. Yeah, I was in my 40s when I started getting, I joined Toastmasters about 3.5 years ago. Prior to that, yeah, I wouldn't dare speak in front of a crowd. Like,
yeah, now look at you. You don't have one, but you have 3 podcasts and a YouTube channel, and you're creating stuff, and that's amazing. That's the whole, see, age is never a feature of transformation. It is only mindset. It is only willpower. That is all that's required to change things around.
Exactly. And I see you've done a TEDx as well. What was that on, and where was it?
So I've done 5 TEDx talks. The first one was in beautiful city of Dublin, Ireland. It was the Fulbright TEDx program. And I spoke about what it meant to be a resident alien, particularly relevant right now, many years later, in the midst of the Black Lives Matter movement that's going on. But essentially, I spoke about what diversity and inclusion meant to me as someone that embraces my difference and my otherness. I am not trying to make people colorblind or not aware of the differences. In fact, I celebrate what makes each of us individual and what makes each of us different. And so that was my take growing up as a diplomat's son in 10 countries on 4 continents. What did that mean for me in the sense of identity, in the sense of community, in the sense of, who was my tribe? Where was my sense of home? And so that was the first TEDx talk. Since then, I've done many other TEDx talks on many other topics, and probably the most popular topic, and it's probably what people who are watching or listening to right now can gather from my stories, is this burning desire to help people start, to change their lives, to live the fullest, most maximizing the most of their potential as possible in the short life that we have on this planet. And so that is essentially the most popular of my TEDx talks, is the whole Start Now, Start Simple talk. And that one is actually on the official TED.com website, which is great. And someday I hope to do a TED talk. Currently, I'm content with the TEDx's, but one day I'm moving up the ladder. I'll make it to the TED stage itself.
Yeah, no, that's very good. I see also you're an entrepreneur and investor. So regarding your skills in speaking, I mean, I know because, you know, I'm an entrepreneur as well, but I believe that the public speaking has a great advantage for business.
Yes. And I heard you saying this in an earlier podcast when I was listening to some of your previous conversations, but I actually think communications is so key. It is so important. Like, you don't have to be Tony Robbins on stage, right? You don't have to be the most inspirational. Like, think of any movie where you have some inspiring talk. You don't have to do that, but you have to be able to communicate effectively. So whether you're selling a product, whether you are persuading a customer about a service, whether you're just rallying your team to fight through a difficult crisis that your company is going through, whether it's in your hiring, where you talk about what the expectations are for the responsibility, like everything I can think about, investor relationships, PR, all of it comes down to communication. It's one of the reasons that I coach people in communications, because for me, it's been transformative. I have 10x'd my fees as an MC simply because of communication. And I'm not talking about the communication on stage. I'm talking about all the communication I do off stage. Like, even right now in this interview, a lot of your questions are coming from content that I created that, I mean, you were not at the event, and yet there's so much content of me from events and outside that gives you a sense of who I am. That's all part of communication. And the reason my fees have increased is because of that branding, because of the communication. And I also think for me, when it comes to networking, when it comes to getting investors for my projects, which you can't switch off being an entrepreneur, right? And so whatever I'm trying to fix or build, when I'm approaching investors and I'm approaching possible co-founders, when I'm hiring staff, it all comes down to the ability to communicate. And so I am grateful that I have a career as a professional speaker and an MC, but I think communication as a core skill set is necessary for anybody that wants to be in a position of leadership in public sector, in private sector, or on a stage or off a stage. So yeah, I'm always pushing for people to enhance their communication skills.
Brilliant. And like, I know some people, you know, they're kind of aspiring to actually get paid as a speaker. How do you make the jump to actually start getting paid as a speaker? Any advice there?
I have advice, but I'll be honest, it's not what applied to me. I have only had one guiding star, and I revisit that direction every 3 to 6 months of my life. And it's simply this: how can I create value in the world I live in? That is the only question I ask. And I firmly believe that if you are solving a problem that someone has, if you are good at solving the problem that someone has, if you're passionate about that solution, then the money will follow. So some people live life chasing money. I have actually chased the other stuff, and money has chased me. And I'm saying that not in a boastful way. I'm being honest with you. So I did not get into professional speaking to get paid to be a speaker. I just listened to what did audiences need. Audiences needed to learn how to bootstrap to build their businesses. Audiences needed to learn how to pitch to investors. Audiences needed to understand what are the 5 pillars of building a successful business. So my speaking actually started off in the form of workshops. But as I was running workshops, I realized that in addition to the hard skills, my audiences also needed motivation, because building a business is as much a personal journey as it is a career journey. And so they needed to be motivated for it. So I started then incorporating some motivational elements into the hard skills that I was training people into. That then led into opportunities to speak in companies. And that then grew into events where companies are coming into, which then grew into major conferences. So it was all very gradual. And all I was doing was going, what is the need? How can I solve the need? Do I enjoy doing it? Am I good at it? And then the money kept following. So that's been my journey. It was very gradual, and it was simply by, am I creating value? And even now as an MC, people don't pay me for the words that come out of my mouth. They pay me for the value I create on stage in the form of engagement, empathy, connection, creativity. Like those are the things that people pay for. And so the advice I'm going to give now is only looking backwards. If I were to do this differently, how would I do it? But it's not my own journey. My own journey, if you want to follow that, is find where can you uniquely create value in this world and pursue that. If you're good at it, and if the solution is relevant to the audience, I promise you the money will come. But if you want to work backwards and do life differently and figure out how to become a professional speaker as opposed to a volunteer speaker, what I would say is focus on personal brand, because a lot of the perception of a speaker is based on how people, well, perceive your value. And so if you've got a really good website, if you've got a really good speaker reel, if you've got really good documents that show testimonials, that show case studies, then people will perceive you to be of high value, and that is how you will then get paid. Until then, you'll only be a buddy that is helping someone out, or, you know, a volunteer speaker that, you know, 30 minutes comes in and does something nice for a company. But if you're able to build a strong personal brand, then, for example, even my name, DanRam, it's not what my parents named me. My name is Daniel. Daniel is everybody's friend. DanRam is a personal brand. People don't hire Daniel, people hire DanRam. DanRam's commercial value is significantly higher than Daniel's commercial value, because Daniel is the guy who plays with all the neighbors a game of football, and he doesn't get paid to play football. He's just Daniel. Daniel's the guy that shows up for a cup of coffee with a friend. The friend doesn't pay Daniel. Daniel just does that for free. Daniel's the guy who shows up at a dinner table and hangs out and gives the same information, the same knowledge, the same resources, but Daniel's commercial value is zero. DanRam, the personal brand, that commercial value is significantly higher. So that's what I'd say, is invest in your personal brand.
Excellent advice. Yeah, I like that. I like that. So I ask a lot of different people about the workshops, because you mentioned about workshops. How did you organize them? Because every single person has their own kind of way of structuring it, and I'd just like to know your way.
Okay, so I would like to say my stuff is theoretical, but I have to be honest, it's not. My workshops are super practical, only because of my motto of start now, start simple. So I'm very fortunate that I went to two great universities. I went to Yale University, where I studied economics in the US, and then I went to Trinity College, where I studied my MBA in Ireland. So two fantastic universities, two great degrees with lots of theory. The thing is, those took 5 years and almost $250,000 to get that education. And I don't think everyone has 5 years and $250,000 sitting around. So with my workshops, I almost do the opposite. I package everything I learned in 5 years, and I see what can I give in, say, 5 hours. And I take everything that I learned in the $250,000 plus over 10 years of working and doing the stuff I do, and I see, okay, how can I provide that at a fraction of the cost? And so my desire is the whole start now, start simple. So my workshops are really simple. We set a goal at the beginning. We'll say, for example, by the end of this conference, the workshop, my apologies, by the end of this workshop, you will have all the tools to be a TEDx speaker. And that is all I focus on. And we achieve that. Now, will they be great on television? Will they be able to nail a radio interview? That's not part of the remit. It is just, you know, super focused. And so all my workshops, we have very clearly defined goals, and we achieve that with practical, hands-on advice as someone who's not retired from the field, but active in the space that I'm coaching in, that I'm running the workshops in. And lots of simulation and group activities, because I think it's the nicest way to learn is through gamification. So there will be Lego, and there will be big pieces of paper, and there will be games, and there will be challenges, and there'll be competitions, and there will be role playing, and there'll be all of that stuff, because I think that's how we learn best. And so that's essentially what people get in a workshop with me, is 1, 2, or maximum 3 clear-cut goals of why they're coming, and then a diverse, creative mix of personal, practical advice from my end, as well as then putting it into practice from the audience or the workshop attendees in this case. And we just make sure that everyone, by the time they leave, is leaving what they came for. And if not, we'll stick around until they get it.
And just regarding your studies, because they're two very good schools. Because obviously I'm Irish, so I'm aware of Trinity, and you said Yale.
Yes.
Because I've, a lot of people talk about different things on the studies. Did you get any opportunities just from class members because of you're surrounded by kind of similar minds? Did that come? Did you get an advantage from that?
I'd say yes, but I couldn't say directly. So there are certain conversations I have with my classmates that I have not been able to have with any other group of people, but also vice versa. There are conversations I enjoyed with my neighbors in Ireland that I've never got with neighbors anywhere else in the world. Because there's a certain culture and a certain mindset and an attitude to people there that you cannot replicate. So there are conversations on productivity, efficiency, pursuing opportunities that are so unique to the Yale atmosphere or to the MBA Trinity atmosphere that I haven't been able to have with other people. And so it has influenced my mindset around what I can and what I can't, around how to achieve and where to let go. But it hasn't been anything direct. So as far as I can remember, I don't think I've ever had an opportunity simply because a colleague or a previous classmate has said, Dan, why don't you do this for me? And it's opened up. I don't think it's anything direct, but indirectly, absolutely, it's had a huge, huge influence. And I do think networks and communities are so important. And I think everyone should be really intentional about who they let into that inner circle, because you are as good as the people around you.
Definitely.
Simple as that.
Exactly. And I know that you've worked with governments as well, because that's one big thing for me. I'm trying to make change in the world. How do you actually liaise with governments on a positive side to make them see the light, basically?
Yeah. Sometimes you are fortunate to end up working with governments that are requesting your help. So in Ireland, I was an advisor to Minister Richard Bruton at the time that he was a Minister for Jobs, Enterprise and Innovation. And Ireland was going through a recession. This is in 2011, 2012. And they realized that supporting small and medium businesses was the way out. There was an overdependence on the major corporations like Facebook and Apple that are in Ireland, and not enough on the actual backbone of the country, which is small, medium enterprises. And so they said, what supports should the government be providing? And thankfully, they went and they brought together a group of people for whom none were bureaucrats. So none of us worked in government. None of us were employed by government. None of us had government biases or lenses. We were investors, entrepreneurs, educationalists. We were people that were in the entrepreneurship space practically. So I was quite fortunate that I had quite a positive experience with a government that realized in order to create new solutions, you have to have new lens. And so they went and got new people to bring that in. And so we put together a report, and I'm very proud to say that over 80% of the suggestions were put into play, which for a public policy document is rare to have that in place. So that was a really positive case study. I think one thing to realize with governments is that the organism that is the government operates very differently than the organism that is, say, private sector or say that is humanitarian. And so sometimes change can be very slow, painfully slow. Sometimes the thinking and the mindset of the people in the organism can be very different. And so I would say this with anyone that is stepping out of their comfort zone into someone else's territory is study the other side. So simple example, with government, often, not always, but often, they don't want to be the first to pilot something that is not tested and proven. More often than not, they would like to take a known case study with known results and put it into action. And so I had to, once I realized that, whenever I had an idea, all I had to do was research, has this idea been implemented in a similar fashion anywhere else? And as soon as I could find that out, I would bring that to government. And that approach was much quicker than me just going, I'm an entrepreneur, I've got this new idea, why don't you try it? And the government's like, we can't risk it. We've got millions of people that depend on us. This is not like running a company with 1,000 customers, And so I would say for anyone that wants to get into government, study how government works. It'll only make your experience a lot better. Some of it will be painfully slow. Some of it will be a nightmare to deal with when it comes to red tape. I am not at all saying those are positive things, but I'm saying if you expect it because you have studied it, the experience can be a lot smoother.
Excellent. I love that. That's very good, positive advice. Listen, Dan, you've given some amazing advice all through. How can people get in contact with you?
Get in contact, but I will say this, expect me to respond to you, because I think sometimes people are quite shocked that I respond to everybody. And so do get in touch and do expect a response, and expect that it won't be just a copy paste link to a video so you can support me. Whatever questions you have, I will answer personally to you, because that is why I'm on social media. So my name is DanRam. Dan is short for Daniel. Ram is short for Ramamurthy, which is a common Indian name. So DanRam. So you can Google DanRam. You'll find my website, which is iamdanram.com. You'll find me on LinkedIn at iamdanram. You'll find me on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, all of them at iamdanram. So you can also just, if you're on any of those platforms, just type in Dan, DanRam, Ram, and you will find me. And I'd love to hear from you. I would love to help you in your journey. And someday when the pandemic is over, I'd love to possibly share the same city or the same room as you.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. Really appreciate it. So that's all
so much
for the Speaking Podcast. As mentioned, all episodes are different. You'll find them all on speakingpodcast.com. We've also got the meditationpodcast.org and learnpolishpodcast.com. Until next week, take care.